If I may just interrupt 2 seconds, I'll just repeat, like to welcome everybody on behalf of the Education Committee, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking to avoid background noises. Turn off your camera if you do not like your image being used for the recordings, because will be recorded, and ask to speak off the record at any time you do not want what you say to be part of the video, and we'll edit it out later. Thank you. Please go ahead, Jeffrey.
Well, I will offer a few thoughts to lead us into a little bit of silent prayer communion worship, as you please, before we begin. And today's session is on leadership. And so let's first, so briefly, bring to mind our wonderful, loving and beloved Universal Father, who is the first pattern of leadership. He leads us in the way of one-to-one relationships and shows himself to send his Spirit to indwell us in the most humble service, never overriding our will, but always communicating at some level that is usually beyond our awareness, helping us along our path. And we remember the eternal Son, or the Creator Son, to whom we are invited to pray, and with whom the invitation is always there into communion, even the continuous communion that should crown our experience by the time we achieve Jerusalem sonship, citizenship. And last, I remember the conjoined actor. And more broadly, the third source family, with whom we are invited to work out the details of our sojourn in this world and other details as well, both in the way of planning in advance and on the fly as we pass by, as it's happening in the thicket of things. From the seraphim to the mother spirit to the cosmic mind, Vorvantan, and more. What a family. So let us now enter the silence to prepare ourselves, our mind, our soul, for our conversation to come in a couple of minutes now. Thank you, one and all. Well, I'm at the moment so moved at the pleasure of seeing you all again that I'm taken aback and have no idea where to start. But I will follow my plan, which is first to ask for a show of hands. How many of you were able to do the reading that I invited you of the document that I sent? Okay. So most of us know most of it, at least at some level of experience. So next, I want to ask if there are any experience reports to share, not necessarily right now, but what's, is there anything coming up? Did anyone find one or two principles that you wanted to work on in your life and set forth to work on? Anything that is in the way of an experience report at this point? Okay. Oh, we do have one. Congratulations, Sam. I can't wait. Why don't you give it to us right now, please?
Well, what I'd like to work on is 10. Let's see. Leaders can look into the stories of Jesus for inspiration and the way he was with people, which is something I love. But I've had recent experience this summer where everything went away. So I'd like to go back to that and, you know, learn that better, because I didn't handle certain situations that well this summer. So that's it in a nutshell.
Well, thank you very much. And let me say, first of all, that I hope that you and I could speak one-to-one over Zoom. My second experience with Zoom and the bonjour, Gilles. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Donc, let me see here. But anyway, Sam, let's talk about this one-to-one, because I suspect that there are things that won't be appropriate for the video and maybe for the class. So we'll do that, but we'll remember, because what has become a problem for you is a problem for me. And maybe you don't sense it when I'm interacting with other students of the Urantia Book who agree with me about so much, and so on. But I have my problems with that matter, and I will be putting that in the background, and we'll pay attention to that as we're able to. And let me just see here. All right, a comment. Now, I want to hear that comment, but I was not minded to do comments at the present time. So what I would like to do, we'll just put that to later. Just put that to later. Now, let's see. I'm going to try sharing my screen. And let's see how this works. This is my first time Zooming. First time Zooming. And all the things that I was hoping to see. Let me see. Just a moment, please. Please forgive me.
If you have a Mac, Jeff, you need to open the document before you can share them on your screen, and they will all appear when you want to share your screen. You choose the one you want.
Right, it's already open.
So click on the share, which
I know. I'm going to choose this one. I think I have a way to my goal. So I'm going to share screen, and I am going to, there we go. So here are the principles, and because many of you are familiar with these and many of you have already read this group, I'm not going to pause by taking much time with this. But what I especially am minded to do with you today is to share with you the experience that I've been having during the past year in my leadership training program. I have learned so much, and I would like to initially just make the statement that wisdom, I have come to realize as never before, is something that we compose in a manner remotely akin to the way the ancients of days equate the voice flashes of eternal wisdom from above with the inputs of experiential wisdom coming from below. I've spent much of my life thinking that if I studied the Urantia Book very well, I would have so much of that higher wisdom that I could consider myself wise. But and this is the lesson I'm giving now, I've given in the past many times, but I have a special sense of it now. There's experiential wisdom, and we get that, for example, from books by human folks who have experience in areas that we lack. So I'll be talking about that. Anyway, fatherly love. A parent will do more for a child than a sibling will. Fatherly love. The second miler service. I know from talking to leaders how much of the most humble work falls to them, how much they're expected to do of that. That's all I'm going to say about that one. Whoops. Trying to find my cursor here. Here we go. Whoops. All right, now we've got leadership and social systems embracing 3 or more personalities. I'm being told that my internet connection is unstable. All the best. I don't know what I can shut off, except the mail program. I can shut that off. So give me a moment. I will shut off the mail program.
to do that, Jeff, you need to go at the top where your menu is and close the mail from there. If you only close the window, it doesn't close the mail program.
Thank you very much, Gaetan. Did it go away? Oh, there it is. It went away. Okay, now I can't emphasize enough how my training in the past year has emphasized this matter of system, because there are boundaries. When you're a leader, you're called to a certain function or range of functions and not to others. At the limit, we can often profit by considering the tacit or implicit system aspects in each one-to-one relationship, because we're all part of systems. The fact of Father presence, the fact that whenever 2 or 3 are gathered in the name of Jesus, he's there with us. That's system, 3 or more. But in an institutional context, and most of the experiences of leadership that we're engaged in are, Sam is working at a company. Gaetan has lots of experience with that. He's working with UAI and study group leadership. Everybody's familiar with systems. We're up to our ears in systems. It's a wonder that we have any one-to-one relationships at all, because the influence of these systems is so very, very pervasive. But there's a sense of responsibility that comes with system awareness that's not there when you're just relating one-to-one. And within a system, you will sometimes have one-to-one interactions and one-to-one relationships. And remembering their systemic context is crucial and high leverage for recognizing boundaries. Teamwork. Now, one of the books that I mentioned in my document that I will be referring to a little bit as we go along is the book that launched my realization of the significance of point 3. This is about teamwork. And you notice, just as I talk about teaching and receptivity, I talk about leadership and teamwork. They go together so intimately, and we fail, I believe, often because we neglect the teamwork in leadership. We neglect the receptivity principle when we're teachers, and that's just hugely important. So my profession as a teacher over the years, and my psychological tendency towards introversion, believe it or not, and other aspects of my experience, my work as a presenter, these are all areas in which I function to a very high degree as a single individual deciding what's going to happen. The book called The Soul of a Leader by Margaret Benefiel, Benefiel. It's in my document. Primarily called me to socialize my ambition. Our ambition to be like God. Becoming a leader is becoming like God. We can become as we are in our spheres, like he is in his perfection of personality and in his universal sphere of righteous supremacy. Well, we're not going to have any universal sphere of righteous supremacy. So, what is meant there? And one of the, we're invited to make becoming like God our supreme ambition. In fact, we're told that those who know God, what that implies, those who really know God have just one supreme desire, just one all-consuming ambition, and that is to become like God. Now, in this matter of ambition, there are a couple of teachings in the book that complement what we have here. And one of them has to do with socializing your ambition. I think that's the one from page 557 when we have you don't just, but to socialize our ambition. So we we do well to work with others and make leadership a team affair. Now, it's on superhuman level. This is principle 4. It's on superhuman levels that provision for leadership is made. And I'll just mention in passing, that opens the question of how you discern that. And even when it's clear how you discern that, how you cope when, you know, things are not functioning right, when the wrong person is asserting authority, and different strategies to do, to handle that. And again, I think we can see Jesus here as our model, and I won't discuss it, but I'm just mentioning that in passing. Now, principle 5 has to do with an enthusiastic and effective load-pulling spirit. This challenges me, this principle challenges me to be enthusiastic, but also enthusiastic in a way that is consistent with the mind of perfect poise. My enthusiasm can become emotional and activate a bunch of energies that are not an ideal combination of energies for the function that I need to perform as an effective, notice this term, effective team member, no matter what, you know, my role in the team happens to be. Principle 6. This is amazing. The universal Father relates to the other paradise deities as an equal. They have different functions, but he relates as equals. Leadership in the creature level is a phenomenon more or less passing, more or less transient within the actualization of the brotherhood of man. That spiritual reality of the whole that we know as the brotherhood of man. So the primary spiritual reality is the brotherhood of man. Our function as a leader is not the primary reality, and if we lose sight of that, we're in a heap of trouble. I'm going to mention now for the first time a book because I don't want to forget to bring it to your attention. It's been very, very important to me as an educational tool in my leadership training program. I'm training for the ministry. And this book was recommended to me. It's titled Preventing Ministry Failure. The authors are Michael Todd Wilson and Brad Hoffman. I think I'll put some of this into an email that I can ask Jeannie to forward to you, or do it myself. I think I have an email address for Gilles, but if not, Gilles, I'm jwattles@kent.edu, and I'll ask you to contact me directly so I can make a note and send these to you. Preventing Ministry Failure. And all I've done at the moment is to draw your attention to this amazingly helpful book. Now, pair relationships. I've already talked about the importance of sharing leadership. And these two, 7 and 8, I could practically put together. Margaret Benefield talks about getting a group of people who share your vision and can support you in various ways, and provisioning yourself. If you're on a functioning in a system which has lots of participants in it, as a leader, you need some people to interact with, to give you feedback, to hold you accountable, to perform a number of functions that are very important. Next, these are the qualities that are important in leadership. Natural ability, we're very well aware of. The book highlights that. Discretion, look at Jesus. Willpower, I interpret as something between us and the will of God, individually and the one-to-one. And determination, I have tended to interpret as resilience in the face of environmental obstacles. Leaders can look to Jesus. There's a lot of material there. Then, those of you who know me well, which is pretty much all of you, I know Gilles less, but those of you who know my work, as Gilles does to some extent, know that in my conviction, the Urantia Book movement and the gospel movement are interrelated but distinct. And the common tendency to confuse those missions and to promulgate the Urantia Book movement in ways that are inconsistent with the requirements of the gospel movement leads to enormous problems. I was thrilled in learning about Jeannie's study group on leadership and teamwork, that the timing of the Urantia Book, the publication mandate, was foundational for this work. It seems to me that's one of the best sources of clarity that we have. And in my website that I'm drawing on now, UB Questions and Studies, there's an entire section titled Sharing the Urantia Book Wisely. I won't go into that. This is going to come up briefly. It's summarized in what we're doing for next week's session. And most of you know what I have to say about that. Now, principle number 12, leaders need preparation and experience. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about elements in the leadership training program that is provided by my denomination. I am amazed at how good it is in many, many, many ways. First of all, well, there are a list of requirements. You have a supervisory body of people who are veterans and who are in charge of supervising you. You take an entire course where my course had 4 Zoom sessions, and they were all-day sessions from 9 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. And we had chapters to read and lots of other materials to read of good intellectual caliber. And we went at it for a month. Now, and the purpose of that was to understand the history, the theology, or the set of ideas, if you will, and the organizational system of the system that I'm getting inducted into. And then the next step, after a seminar on the soul of a leader by Margaret Benefiel, that was my initial phase. Then there was, in the sequence in which I did these things, a very probing psychological examination. It originally was scheduled to be a 3-day examination in companionship with 2 other participants, but for various reasons it turned into a 1-day event. But that 1-day event was prepared by my submitting detailed and extensive information about my medical history, my personal history, autobiographical, psychological. I took a Myers-Briggs test, and all that happened before I even showed up. And I showed up, I think it was 8 o'clock, it might have been 9 o'clock. I was out of there by 4:30, and it was just nonstop. It was intense. There was a lunch break, which was a little bit abbreviated. And on the basis of that, I was given feedback and then a formal report on which I made some comments, which went into another report, which was circulated among the, I think, 7-member committee that I'm responsible to, that supervises people in my part of Ohio. So you begin to see the thoroughness and the point of the psychological inventory and the psychological assessment is that we all have stuff. And if you're going to be a leader, it's expected that you know about your stuff. Not that you don't have any, everybody does. But for the most part, people are much better at seeing problems in others than they are in seeing problems in themselves. This is what Jesus talked about when he, take the log out of your eye before you try to take a speck out of someone else's eye. So this aspect of leadership, I would not, well, you see the older document that I've touched up a bit for today's work. I've said enough. You get the idea. Psychological self-knowledge. Now, Jesus doesn't advocate, the method of self-analysis and self-examination as a spiritual path. But it's more like when you run into a bump, look hard. And if you tend to be overconfident, that's another indication that you might be able to use a bit of self-examination. Maybe it's used to excess. It certainly has in Christian history, but there's street smarts there as well as excess. Now, let's see. Principle 13. Even though leaders are at best middle managers, because there's God after all, leadership must have relative independence. Jesus was independent of human opinion. I remember a minister that I heard on the first day that he addressed his new congregation. And he said to the congregation, "I'm here to serve God number 1 and you number 2. I've tried it the other way around and I know it doesn't work." I'm very glad I was there for that first day because it was probably 20 years ago and I can remember the lines still. I think it's very, very important. And leaders, including teachers, because all teachers are leaders to some extent and all leaders are teachers to some extent, cannot be entangled in what they hope to uplift. So get engaged, yes, deeply engaged, but not entangled. 14, work for spiritual unity. I won't say anything about that right now. Leaders make wise compromises. Now, I have a blazingly clear and increasingly definite idea of what I want to do with my opportunities of institutional leadership that I'm training for, even if I don't exit the training program for, 7 years or whatever. I will be able to have some level of leadership function before then. So And I'm at the point now where I am not in a hurry. Oh, I'm not in a hurry. But my program is, I have clear ideas, in your terms. I'm not going to use this title, but I want the church that I lead, if I get a chance to do that, to become a spiritual renaissance church, to be one of those churches that's oriented to evangelism in the sense of the Urantia Book. But I jolly well know, with all the components in what I intend, the goals that I have for the institution that I hope to lead, is compromise. Compromise, compromise. There's a rhythm. Evolution goes slowly. I don't expect to get very far on, and my venture is in no small measure to see how far I can go while sustaining appropriate relationships as I grow with them. Now, this is major. 16, I want to talk about this at some length. It's about becoming like God. God is awesomely gentle. Do we not know this? Every one of us in our lives, the gentleness of God. And when I say God, I have in mind the first triunity, the universal Father, the truth spirit of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. All one in our experience. The gentleness is breathtaking, and the strength is breathtaking. There's strength, there's power, breathtaking. Now, strength and gentleness go together. Gentleness without strength is weakness. It's false compassion. It's a mistake that all kinds of people make. And one of the books on leadership that I read years ago, that I just reviewed to some extent this morning so that I could share it with you. It's titled A Failure of Nerve, N-E-R-V-E, by Edwin H. Friedman. The subtitle of the book is Leadership in the Age of the Quick Fix. But this man lambasts the tendencies within religious organizations. And I've seen it a lot in the United States. I don't have enough experience to be able to say outside the United States, but I've seen it among students of the Urantia Book in the United States a lot, where there hasn't been adequate strength of clear, decisive, vigorous leadership. As I speak with you, Gaetan is the great exception in my mind to that failure of nerve. I mean, he's a great one. Others of you, I'm sure I should make exceptions again, but Gaetan, I'm in the share screen, so I'm not looking at you all right now, but I know Margie's got all this leadership experience and so on, so I know that she knows this lesson too. And strength is not true strength if it loses touch with compassion, with mercy, with that second source and center characteristic. Mercy is love applied to an intelligent and wise understanding of the needs and capacities of the person or group with whom you're interacting. When you when you let go of mercy, when you let go of compassionate, caring gentleness, it's not strength anymore, it's something else. Those words that we use to express the power of God are not words that we should use if that mercy, if that ministry of mercy is not also there, unified. I'm going to talk about this topic a little bit more because this is the main kind of lecturing that I wanted to do before we discuss things openly. In the balance between strength and gentleness, I want to mention a book titled Managing Church Conflict. It's by Hugh F. Halverstadt, Halverstadt. And it takes a structural approach to analyzing conflict situations, appraising the situation, and stages or strategies for managing conflicts. There are constraining strategies, preventing exchanges, changing contextual factors, coaching the principles in the conflict step. The next step is resolving strategies, negotiating issues, or mediating relationships. And then finally, well, there's more to it, but J. Peregrine was such a keen observer of sociological process. It took my breath away. He worked for decades in Urantia Foundation as the executive director there, and just a remarkable person. When he visited me here in Ohio, we went to church together, and he heard me do a presentation to a church, and he told me afterward there was a guy who came in late, sat in, and Jay picked out. He knew right away that this guy was going to give me trouble, and he did. Well, it wasn't serious. It wasn't, but Jay picked him out immediately. In my experience, in my own study, and in my experience of the movement of students, the Urantia Book generally, we are strong in psychology a lot and weak in sociology a lot. And when I was doing my study of science in the Urantia Book, most recently, I was astounded to see how much sociology was there that I had overlooked as sociology because my focus was too much on psychology, too much on personal growth emphasis. Now, there's one last book that I will mention with you today, and it's on this issue of leadership that needs to integrate strength and gentleness. And to say strength and compassion doesn't quite say it for me, but strength and gentleness. I can't say enough about Marshall Rosenberg. Marshall B. Rosenberg. He's a psychologist. He died 2 years ago. And the third edition of his book titled Nonviolent Communication, subtitle, A Language of Life, came out. Now, on the surface, what Marshall is teaching is the same approach, the same emphasis on empathy and mutuality that Friedman is criticizing. But if you look closely, what you see is, and just looking for it now and just finding it now, and it thrills me to the gills. I'm seeing the strength that Friedman is calling for in the method that Rosenberg is teaching. Marshall Rosenberg has a 9-hour training video in YouTube that is available. Email me. I'd love to share this with you. Let me say a little bit more. Rosenberg was a mid to late 20th century psychologist who specialized in conflict mediation. And what he would do is, now, you know, as his career flourished, he went all around the world mediating conflicts. He mediated successfully between a group of 30 Palestinians and 30 Israelis. He mediated successfully between gangs in Los Angeles and in Chicago between gang members and police. He trained thousands of people, and I remember one of his stories is about a woman who used his method to avoid getting raped. This is powerful, strong stuff. This is not a technique that merits the critique of inadequate empathy that Friedman is tilting against, empathy without strength. So I've been in a weekend seminar led by one of Rosenberg's close friends and colleagues and companions. I just can't say enough about this. In our world today, where we need peacemaking, and Rosenberg's principles are simply that if we learn to separate fact, interpretation, and evaluation, and express our feelings and the needs that underlie them. And he has standards for appropriate expressions of feelings and needs. Then, when there's mutual empathy such that each side, maybe it's a couple that's in the midst of divorce, when each party can express the feelings and needs of the other party to the other person's satisfaction, then you've got that mutuality. It can take maybe 45 minutes to take people. You know, it's time consuming to do the work of getting there. But once you get there, it's like the spirit has happened, and it becomes amazingly easy to work out what has to be worked out. There's one more thing I wanted to say about that. What was it? Well, I think you can, I mean, I am devoting myself to be a peacemaker. You know, in this time when in theology, liberals and conservatives are at each other's throats, in politics, in economics, and in society, in so many ways, people are at each other's throats. And I want to use an integration of Friedman's understanding of strength, Halberstadt's understanding of structure in mediating conflict, Benefield's thoroughness and touching on a lot of important bases, Rosenberg and some of these other people. I want to integrate these. Oh yeah, this is what I wanted to add about Rosenberg. The term needs needs to be interpreted and needs to be transplanted into the garden of Urantia Book study. Oh, that could have been Margie. Bye, Margie. She had to go after 1 hour, I know. Needs are those legitimate, wonderful needs that, let me see here. Yeah, okay. But these are wonderful needs. Remember when Jesus is talking about a self-mastery problem, and what he does is that he says, first, recognize it honestly. First, recognize temptation honestly for exactly what it is. Then rechannel the energies of spirit, mind, and body, which are thus seeking expression. In other words, there are good energies. You just have to rechannel them. And so the needs that Rosenberg is working with are legitimate needs. None of them is an ugly need, and that's part of the key to his work. All right, that's enough of that. I'm gonna see here now. 17. This is more about toughness. If erring leaders cannot be corrected, they must be replaced. Leadership inevitably functions, consciously or unconsciously, wisely or not. Part of our problem is that we mortals are designed to respond to the leadership of superhuman planetary leaders and rulers. And in the absence of effectively present superhuman leaders, we tend to follow human leaders irresponsibly. In addition, religious leadership is problematic. In the current age, when people look for shamans, mediators between humans and the spirit world, when leadership goes bad, teamwork responsibilities shift from primarily cooperating with leaders to correcting, and if need be, replacing them, as did Van. In a leadership vacuum, the qualified individual or team must assume leadership. Leaders need to study the principles of organization. On my UB Questions and Studies website, I have some material relevant to that. It's just very, very important. And I will say basically one last thing here. I'm going to not go into 20 because 20 is really an elaboration on the very first principle. But if we're combining gentleness and strength, the most obvious pattern of Jesusonian guidance that we have, at least in my understanding in the Urantia book, is page 17, 62, 63. It's, I can't remember the number of the paper, maybe 160. No. It's the lesson on forgiveness. It starts with the parable of the lost sheep. Then it goes into the mercy process. If your brother sins against you, go to him one-to-one. Then take 2 or 3 people who know you both and can be fair. And if there's still serious, deliberate, persistent, harmful behavior, then take it to the whole community, the ecclesia, the gathered group. And the person may need to be disfellowshipped, cast out, regarded as a persona non grata. So I wanted to do this for the first hour, and then I wanted to open it up. So I've done what I wanted to do in the first hour. Thank you for your patience. And now it's open to you all. Comments and questions?
Well, Gilles had a comment earlier he wanted to make. Gilles?
Oh, yeah, Gilles. Tu es là encore, Gilles?
Oui, bien sûr. Je ne saurais manquer cela.
Pas fort parce que je dois élargir la qualité de la force du son, mais je ne sais pas comment je vais le faire. Alors, ça parle avec plus de force extra.
Okay. And now I'm going to speak English as well to be consistent with the everyone here. Yeah, so I wanted to make a comment about in your paper there is a section about you call that the let me see.
Objections against training leaders?
Yes, objection about training leaders. So you talk about a number of things. I'm not sure if you make the point that I have in mind. I'm sure you touch upon some of the point, but the point that I want to make is some of the danger is like there are several components that I see. One is the knowledge in general. Like there is in Urantia Book in particular a lot of information, some very advanced, and we may or may not have a good understanding, and I have that knowledge. That's one aspect of at least from the perspective of founding whatever we do in terms of and do with our leadership based on the Urantia Book. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect is a lot related to what you have been talking about in terms of a number of things you need to be aware of. Some of them could be growth about the character, or some aspects, sociology, psychology, meekness, all whatnot, plus a number of tricks, how to speak, how to organize things, and blah, blah, blah. There are a lot of things that are beneficial for us to be exposed and trained at that is very valuable. Even if we may have chance to have strength on some aspect, it's always good, right? And even more important if we're not that strong naturally. So all of these are a good thing. And then there's another aspect, which is what we do with it, right? We all have different styles, different strength, different interests in a way of sharing our faith, sharing the Urantia Book, sharing whatever we want to share from whatever we want to do in terms of leadership, in terms of we could be sensible to some kind of project and not others. That depends also a lot about our experience, but it depends about a lot of things. So there's a lot of variety out there. So all of that to say that we sure can help each other. We can train. We can even certify in terms of knowledge of the Bible, knowledge of the Urantia Book, knowledge on the training material, and so on and so forth. However, there is something that I think we may have a sense. We can have an opinion, but I don't think we have authority either individually. Certainly not individually, and definitely a challenge as a group is to certify faith, and that's one aspect. And then the other thing is about the initiative that I was talking about. We all have different characters, different personalities, different desires, different experiences, and we want to do things in different ways. And also as a group, being judgmental and trying to channel what some people want to do, there is a danger in that, and we have seen in the past, and I certainly personally see different of opinion that have slipped towards fighting, and in my opinion there were like very it didn't seem. Like, for example, an example would be some people want to make a Urantia church, and some are very adamant not to do that. And I have seen some people fighting like cats and dogs, and I was just friends with all of them. So, and this is just one example. The point here is that, at least in my view, faith is overall to me the most important part of the equation. Even though all the other are foundational as well, and that faith is not for a human to judge, and to even in much less shape. So when we talk about certification, I would certainly hope that it doesn't include certification of faith. Knowledge, yes; faith, no. And then also again about the initiatives. About I think we should, the way I would view like a social organization about that, like for example the Urantia society of some form, whether it's the foundation or UAA or whatever, is we need to help people realize what they have deep in them in terms of mission or in terms of interest, and how to manifest it, not so much stifling and saying, no, and that's not good, that's not the way I would do it, so you shouldn't be doing that, that's bad, kind of things. And I think in the process of certifying and in the process of having over control about that, there is a danger. So again, I'm not sure if you have, these are my own words and the way I feel, and I apologize for taking so much time. I didn't prepare that well, but that's what came out from me when reading that part. And the reason probably it came out is that I tend to be, I don't want to use that word. The best word that comes to me is a form of a rebel. So I'm like the ecclesiastic kind of authority is something that is not working too well with me. So that's something that as an institution we need to, in my opinion, be careful of. And we have seen some of the pitfalls of not taking care of that many times in the history of our groups. Well, I guess that's pretty much the best I could do to express what I had in mind on this topic.
I applaud how well you did to express yourself. Your English is wonderful. Your thinking is clear. You gave plenty of points with enough in the direction of examples that we could understand vividly what you mean. Wonderful job, Gilles. Thank you very, very much.
Well, thank you to you, and thank you for listening. So then what would you think about what I just said, and how does it relate to what you, the paragraph you wrote on this topic?
Oh, I don't think I have any disagreements with what you said. I haven't thought about it a great deal. I do take seriously the idea that we should train leaders, but you know, what does that mean? I mean, I have a mentor, an advisor in my process, and you know, he's a trained person. He does a wonderful job, and I've found these people not suppressing my dreams, my desires. They're, you know, it's just not happening. The denomination that I'm in at the upper levels of organization has a very clear position on lots of things, but that position is not imposed on anybody. There's a wonderful openness. So it seems to me that your comments do a lot towards defining maturity in the process. I can remember, I mean, I'm not sure I think maybe that's enough to say right now. Enough to say. I would like to hear from some others of you. Gaetan.
Thank you, Jeff. Quite an extensive review of what leadership should be about. And I think we are clearly lacking in that aspect of our goal to train leadership. As my own experience, one of the challenge, I think, of leadership within our own organization is to reconcile the Urantia Book with our own cultural upbringing and the different cultures of the world. You know, some of the things that might be fearful to me, if I don't know if the word fearful might be, or something I might find objectable to my own perception, as when we, as leader, we're trying to lead people in the spiritual direction, might not be appropriate to other culture. And that's something that leadership within the Urantia movement has to come up with solution. And you know, I think traveling around, meeting all those different cultures can resolve part of those issues. But I also believe that what you touched upon, which is the psychological aspect of who we are, know yourself. And this is why, for me, it's very important that what we try to teach or lead, we must teach and lead by example. We must first have applied in our own life what we want others to do. We need to be, what you said in your elaboration of leadership, a second miler. And the tendency that I had personally as a leader is trying to surround myself with people that would enthusiastically engage in their own respective expertise as a team, you know, because as a team you have people of different background, different potentials, different intellectual knowledge, and to try to make them all work together, that's quite a task. And to try to get them engaged enthusiastically in the same mission, in the same vision, that's quite a task. And I think leaders need to know well the mission in which they are engaged. And I think as such, you have touched on the point of the publication mandate, which for me, when it was presented to me in Chicago in 2003, became one of the main documents. I think one of the document I referred to most of the time when in doubt about what I was doing. But like also you said, the loyalty comes first to God. I'm serving God first. I'm serving the mission of the revelation, and then the people that are there. And then if the organization doesn't support this loyalty, then for me it has no need to exist, or else it needs to change. But coming back to the psychological aspect of leadership, I think that's one of the hardest things we need to accomplish. I think for me anyway, I don't know about everyone else, we all have fears of looking deep within ourselves. To be not humble, but honest, really honest. To be honest with oneself is not something easy to do. There are things we don't like to see, you know. Our ego doesn't like to admit that we have this deficiency, or, well, this defect, or whatever we can call it. I have my own, and I've been struggling with some of my basic fear, you know, of very personal, I call them handicap. Sorry about the phone. But you know what I mean. And I think, how would we create a school where we would teach leaders, how we create a course where leaders would come together and address all those issues? This is what I'm interested in. And you touch on that subject by building all those different examples of what is needed for a leader, and the books to read also. And I think you're a valuable resource for that, because you have been exploring all those issues. And I can say I am humbled by what you just presented to us. You know, like, wow, there's so much stuff I still need to achieve and to do. And I wonder if I'm going to have all the time that is needed before I leave this planet to acquire, you know, to go through all of this. But I think it's a good start. You know, people should be more aware and enthusiastically embrace a program of leadership. And I think that we would go far in doing that. Anyway, I want to thank you. I feel a lot of good feeling about that. And I want to thank you for having prepared this workshop. I'm done.
I want to thank you very much, Gaetan, for your very helpful expression as a seasoned leader yourself. Sometimes, even if we say we're making the same point, we'll say it in different ways. And those different ways will convey the heritage of our experience in that matter and our personality and how God works with us in ways that will amplify someone else who's saying the same thing. I mean, it's not the same thing because of all these other variables. And that, I want to comment on one aspect of what you said. It has to do with what in translation and maybe elsewhere is called localization. The famous example of that is how to get one Spanish translation for all the Spanish-speaking readers around the planet. Well, not only do you have a difference between Spain and Latin America, but you've got differences between different Latin American countries too. And there is a tendency in companies who do their business well to not assume that one type of product and one strategy for advertising that product will be effective in every culture. So the game now is to localize, to adapt it. And it seems to me that that is what is so important. In my training, there are, the emphasis that I've been given is this: because of your psychological type, because of your experience, because of your training, there are certain tendencies that you will have. You'll have, let's say, a certain leadership style. And that leadership style is just what certain types of situation need. And other types of situation need different leadership styles. And the skilled leader is the one who develops an array. And this takes a lot of training. But you learn to be strong and vigorous with this person, to be compassionate and patient with that person as is needed. And in my case, I need to learn the strong and vigorous modes, because too much of my gentleness has been weakness. That's one of the things that Friedman taught me. And I'm so excited now to be in a training program that recognizes these kinds of things and is set up to help me in this. The next phase of my training, along with some academic aspect, is what's called CPE, Clinical Pastoral Education. For that, you are working, depending on which semester you're doing, part-time or full-time for months, with hospital rounds, and it's supervised. And the first few months are focusing on helping you become aware of your own reactions and how they are manifesting. And but only later on with that do you get to the point of learning styles of communication that are not native to your personality type. So I just want to underscore what you've already said there. Making adaptations to the person, to the culture, to the group is absolutely crucial.
Thank you.
You'll hear about that again in Amsterdam from me.
Okay.
Jeff, Donna raised her hand.
Oh, great. Please come ahead.
Sorry, I had to unmute my mic. So I don't want to be too redundant because I agree with everything that our last two commenters had to say. I'm interested in the idea of training leaders as well. And I wanted to cheer, Jeff, what you said about the Urantia community not having adequate training in sociology, but being very well versed in psychology. And my own perception, my own experience, although I am very new to the Urantia community, I do observe that cultural collision is something that we don't have a lot of proficiency in navigating at this time. And so understanding the reference points of others, the values, the signature values of other cultures sometimes prevents us from having the kind of courageous conversations that are needed when those collisions occur. And even sometimes in gender, holdovers from previous generations of the role of women in serving. So I believe that I would extend the training in sociology to also deconstructing our ideas of gender, deconstructing our ideas of cultural collision. And in that, I have found readings in the world of diplomacy to be very helpful, to learn what it's like to be that person, to be in the room, to be willing to set aside ego for the moment and try and move the room towards mutual understanding and mutual values, and to highlight those commonalities before moving forward, trying to create divisions around who's right and who's wrong, but to highlight common values. So I would, maybe before we finish, I'll try and put up in the chat group a recommended reading or two around diplomacy studies as a part of building our stamina for those difficult conversations. That's all.
Well, I couldn't be more thrilled than to meet a new person in this gathering. Everyone else I've met before, Gilles, I know less than everyone else I'd seen, and now I'm seeing you. So I rejoice and give thanks. I give thanks to God for creating you, and I give thanks to you for working with your gifts that brings you here and for sharing. And I was about to ask you for some suggested readings in the field of diplomacy. I can't wait. I can't wait. And I have notes from a talk that I presented in a related area that I would enjoy to share with you. So if you want to write to me at J, I think maybe it's already in my email, but J Wattles, JWATTLES at Kent, KENT.edu. You know, especially as I get more skilled on this new computer, I would love to continue the conversation.
I'll be delighted to, and thank you so much for the warm welcome. That was very heartwarming. Thank you so much to everyone.
Well, let's talk about, let's go with the topic that Sam raised. And I particularly did not want to, well, wait a minute, maybe I should ask and you will receive. Ed, what have you got to add to what you've heard today?
Well, thanks, Jeff. I'm just trying to digest this huge pile of information that has been thrown at me this morning. I will say a couple things, though. One thing for the group here that Susan and I, we went with Jeff to a meeting about non-conforming violation, or excuse me, I got that incorrect.
Nonviolent communication.
Nonviolent communication, thanks, Jeff. And we spent a day which was quite remarkable. And one other thing, we were scheduled to go to Hemet this morning for a California session with him, Jeff, and we turned it down to be with you. Can you believe it? So we feel bad about that, but we're going to get back on, because there'll be other sessions here in California, and I'm sure that they're quite rewarding. Let's see if I any of my other notes here. One thing for me is maybe I'm not in schedule to, as the late Vern Grimsley said, to lead the United Nations in a talk, you know. But what I can do is I can interact with people on the street or my own friends. And I think the biggest lesson that I've learned in the last 30 days is when you're a Urantia student, you've been one for 40 years, and you know about your spirit awakening and what have you, and you're in talking with people, it's very important that you have no social wants or likes or dislikes with these individuals. You have to be only with this, as Jesus would do, working on people's souls, not on their personal belief systems and everything. And I've learned this the hard way over the last few months, especially during this election, that no matter how much you think this or that is wrong, you just cannot voice your opinions. It just causes a friction between you and this other individual, and you've destroyed probably a good opening for spiritual awakening between the two of you, or between the group of you. So other than that, Jeff, that's me for today. Thank you very much.
Alan, Mindy?
Thanks, Jeff. Well, part of my thoughts were how much of this material was based on modeling after deity, but I think that there is also a wealth of information in part 3 of the Urantia book that pertains to what we're trying to do, and effective leadership, and you know, how we can raise our planetary status. And I was reminded that Jesus, after his baptism, when he went to plan his ministry, at that point he was completely conscious of who he had been, and had the consciousness of himself as a creator son and deity. So he had that understanding that of how things worked, which would have been what we get from part 1 and 2 of the Urantia book. And then he sat down and reviewed the whole planetary history of Urantia and the prior epical revelations, which is what we get out of part 3. And from that, then he said about planning, okay, where do we go from here? How do we lift this? How do we, how do we intelligently minister to the people of this planet? So I guess that's why they gave it to us like they did. And another thought I was having on leadership is the importance of questions. Somebody else was talking about how, when we start just jumping in with our opinions, sometimes it can create more trouble than coming to solutions. But when we can approach things by asking questions and trying to gain understanding, then we can get a lot further. I had an experience this week. I have a leadership role in a church, and it's, we had some difficult decisions to make. So I pulled together all of the information for them, and then I thought, well, should I make any recommendations? Should I not make any recommendations? I thought, well, they may need a little steering in the right direction. So, I did make some recommendations. After, full and thorough discussion, we were able to build consensus, and was not what I would have done, but it was good, and I think we avoided some of the potential problems that, you know, had we just gone forward the way that you know, me by myself with my own thinking would have done it, you know, would have had some problems. We may have some different problems. We'll see. But, you know, just the idea that, you know, together we can come up with greater solutions when we're working together with people who all are, you know, God indwelt and God led, that, you know, we can really make a difference and come up with some great solutions. So that's it. Thanks.
You just saying hi, Alan, or do you want to?
I'm just going to listen.
Okay.
I'm trying to be a good follower today.
Okay.
Y'all be the leaders and teachers, and I'll follow you.
Well, my reason for talking about leadership and teamwork is that I rather say we follow Jesus. We work with leaders. Now, there's another person whom I may remember, but may not. Flor Robles, would you like to contribute any comment?
Well, yes. It was difficult for me to read everything that you sent because I have had a very busy week. But I started to read, and I just got some points that caught my attention at the beginning of your reading. And one of them is that says, leadership is about service. And then you point, fatherly love transcends brotherly love. Normally we can treat others like brothers, but yes, he's right. Fatherly love is totally different. To make things happen, to make things work, you need to use that kind of idea in the love, or feel, or express, not as a brother equal, but as a father, which is totally different. Another thing that caught my attention in the second paragraph was, it says, eternal son is the pattern of teamwork. And he cooperates in leadership and the bestowals, not one-on-one, but social systems. It was so interesting. And I kept thinking about that. Relation to, system more than two. Another thing that caught my attention was son spirit, brotherly teamwork. I never thought about that. It's interesting. And the spirits group, pattern group functioning, organized. And then you will see that I didn't advance much. I kept thinking about all these things. But then you finish one of the, I lost it, with one question. Let me see, let me find it. And I got stuck there thinking about that question that says, here, how shall we discern who is the appointed leader in a particular pair relationship and social group? I don't think we can point someone as a leader, not to point, but it's about feeling who is the leader. It's something that just comes naturally. And suddenly we can follow someone because of what he does, because of how he achieved the goal. It just comes, it's something that is there. Without saying that's the leader, we know, we feel, we can follow that person that is naturally a leader. Then in the paper, you also put it in the paper one, write it down here, 181, I think. Leadership comes from from our Father. Jesus said, you have it there. So it's something that is there. It comes, well, we can learn how to do it and how to manage better, but it's something that just flows. That ability in that person who can pull all the people or help others to do it and have the things done, it's just there. Well, from my perspective, but I have to read the rest of the document. Thank you.
Flora, thank you very much for everything that you shared. I want to emphasize your appeal to intuition. You said we can't appoint a leader, but intuitively we recognize a leader. And intuitively, such a person has a way about him or her that makes leadership effective. I think that matter of intuition is extremely important. And I would also say that intuition is something that we can cultivate our power for. We have capacities for intuition with cosmic mind, causation, duty, worship, and the system of all them, of all of those. There's a unification of those that has a particular beauty that we can feel. We can cultivate our capacity for intuition. So, because sometimes what we think is intuition turns out to be mistaken. So I would just add that as a footnote. But it seems to me the talk that I presented very, very much needed the emphasis that you gave. And even though I have a footnote as a qualification, by far the most important thing is what you contributed. So thank you very much. And I hope I can see you and everybody else next week. Okay, now let's see. We have got almost a half hour left, 22 minutes or something like that. And I would like to close with some little bit of silence. But one of the things you mentioned, it was Mindy that mentioned questions. So I will comment, I will expand on what Mindy said in my attempt to respond to Sam. And I will use this as a transition for an activity that I think we might enjoy and could easily take us through the end of our time together today. Ask questions in order to gain understanding. Jesus asked questions, and Sam undoubtedly will easily recall the work that we did together in seminars a couple of years ago in order to explore the kinds of questions that Jesus asked. For example, Sam and I did vocational interviews with one another. We noticed that Jesus was extremely interested in what people did to earn a living, how they worked during their days and ways, what they did. He wanted to know, and he interviewed people to find out about that aspect of their lives. And one of the things that we discovered in our vocational interviews was that it was easy for people to talk about these. It was not invasive. And there was, now, of course, Sam and I have a friendship that goes back a long way. I could ask these questions. I wouldn't ask them, if someone is just checking into the hotel. Sam, if I remember right, is still, unless things have changed, working at a hotel. you know, you don't ask a stranger these necessarily, but I was trying to think of questions to ask. So I would say, you know, what do you like best about your job? And then I always, if I could find a way to do it, and I did a few of these, but not many. It's one of those things that I did and then got busy with other things. But I like to ask the question, what are, you know, what's one of the biggest problems that you have in your line of work? And when you're at your best, how do you handle it? So I'm not asking for a story of failure, though sometimes I would hear stories of failure coming back to me that I didn't invite. But another thing that I remember in training on evangelism, I asked a marvelously wise minister, how do you avoid coming on too strong? Because I know that I can come on too strong. You know, for example, I'm in a church and I'm greeting people and I start some conversation, I can come on too strong. And he said, keep the focus on the other person. Keep asking questions about the other person. So, all right, now I'm gonna shift gears. Oh, Pio, what a treat to see you, Pio. Now I'm going to ask you to engage in an exercise for a few minutes that I used to do in classes, and I would call it a question explosion. We're going to have a question explosion. Sometimes I would give people the assignment in the next class period in 1 or 2 days or 3 days to come back into class with you know, a question or maybe a handful of questions. And sometimes with students of the Urantia Book, I've encouraged people to think of a question from the soul as well as a question from the mind. But regarding NPO, I want you to participate on this with no expectation. I want you to feel totally comfortable about the fact of how much of this session you may have missed and how much of my website article you might not have had time to read. So I want you to participate without feeling any embarrassment about any of those factors, okay?
Okay, I did not look, I guess I look embarrassed, thank you.
All right, now what I'm going to ask us to do is for everyone to take, let's take 2 minutes for this, and everyone come up with a question about leadership from the mind or the intellect, and a question from the soul. Might be too little time to ask for that question of the soul, but if you've got something deeper, let's hear it. And after 2 minutes, I'll invite people to share their questions, and we won't try to answer them all because we won't have time for it. But just listening to the questions will stimulate us, and we'll meet again next week. And who knows, maybe there will be some way of applying next week's work to this week's questions. Take 2 minutes. All right. I'm going to interrupt your creative thinking right now, and I would like each person to share with me what they came up with in that time. Do you want to start, Pio? We haven't heard anything from you today. Would you give us a question or two about leadership that would be interesting to you to know about or explore?
Thank you, Jeff. FYI, I was here from 9:02. You just missed my big face.
Oh, I see.
And I am, as usual, I'm going through your materials. I had it printed out back to back, and I was reading it. Thank you. I guess the question is, part of the reason why I'm participating in this weekend workshop is to learn, because I'm now involved with UAUS, and I appreciate your leadership and Jetan's leadership, Rick Lyon, etc. But what I would like to do is, what constitutes a leader? And there are barriers to leadership. For example, this morning, I was looking at some candidates to host a workshop in Amsterdam per their request, and I asked a couple to consider that, and at first they were very enthusiastic. But when they found out that it was hosting a workshop for, let's say, an hour with students, they immediately said, Jeffrey Wattles would be very good at this. So what I'm saying is, the unqualified potential leaders out there, what will convince them to step up and volunteer to host a workshop? Because most of the people, including myself, feel absolutely unqualified to host a workshop, because first of all, the book is so voluminous, and of course it'll take time to do the research, and you have been a professor for decades, and I absolutely enjoy your workshop in all the conferences that I went to. So what would encourage those self-perceived unqualified leaders out there to step up and be a leader? And number two is, I would encourage other leaders like Jameson or herbal tea.
Mo?
Mo, yeah, Mo. I like those people to, come into this workshop and share with us what made them step up and be a trustee, etc., and share with us so they could lead by example also. Jesus, after all, trained 12 ignorant fishermen, and some of them were, illiterates, and they all became leaders. So those are the, those are the questions that I have. What would make those self-perceived unqualified leaders or teachers to step up and encourage them? Number two, I would like to see more role models like Jetan and you, Jeff, who always stepped up to participate in this workshop.
Thank you, Pio. Who is ready with your contribution? Flor, have you got something for us? I'm emphasizing some people that I know less.
Donna just raised her hand.
Oh, Donna, great. I don't see all these pictures. Oh, I think my problem is that I don't have the right Zoom function clicked. There we go. Look at you people. Oh, I'm so sorry that I wasn't opening up to, what a relief. Susan, okay. Rick, I didn't even know you were there. I apologize. And I apologize for not being here last week. I wanted to, I ardently did, and it was just too much, so I didn't. But of course, you gave us a lot of questions for last week's session. Is there anything that the two of you would like to, put in this hopper?
Well, I think each of us came up with a question. This is a very great topic you're doing, a very important topic, and it's great that it's following up from last week because, how important leadership is to organizations, and if we recognize how important social groups and social organizations are to multiplying our individual power of, our spiritual power and intellectual power and our physical power, then we have to recognize the importance of leadership in the organization. So it's a very appropriate and very important topic. So, but you were saying a question based on, I think, the soul, and mine, the question I came up with, what's the relationship between leadership and self-mastery? And then I'll let Susan go with her question.
Oh, first of all, I'd like to just say how pleased I am to see Donna here today. Donna, it's good to see you again. And just from our experience today, we were late, but Rick had his book signing today. But we had a question put to us today, to Rick, that was an interesting question, I feel, for the leadership question. And that was, what was his authority to teach what he was teaching? And I thought he had a great answer to that I feel that he can share. But also, in response to what Pio said, I would just like to say that my first response to you when you said, how can we ask teachers and leaders to feel confident to stand up and teach, is by asking them to stop comparing themselves to others, because that is such a source of self-questioning. I believe that when we're connected with the spirit of truth, we're very powerful, and we should be encouraged to step up and teach. And by comparing myself with Jeff or with someone who's got years and years of training, I think it's just a very defeatist attitude, and it does nobody any good, because all of us have a unique personality that we leave behind with those we share with. And that isn't something that's taught. That's something that's God-given, and it's a gift. So just be yourself and do your best. And I think that's the best encouragement we can give. But as far as my other question, it was in regards to, and I'm sorry I didn't see all of your writings, Jeff, but it was in regards to disfellowshipping. And I'm remembering something Mindy said about, if we're going to be a true leader, we model after deity, which means being fatherly and being like Jesus. And I'm reminded of this because I just read something recently about Jesus' family and his difficult brother, Jude, and how Jude had given their family so much troubles on so many occasions that James and Joseph were of a mind to throw him out of the family, throw him out. And it said Jesus was a man of peace. He wouldn't hear of it. He said patience was required, and that in time Jude would see the error of his way, and he did. It worked. And that was the fatherly approach. And that's my feeling about disfellowshipping. That's all I have to say. Love you all.
Thank you very much. I haven't heard from Jeannie.
Just a few words, my friends, with my poor English. I apologize again. I listened what Susan said. I think she said beautiful words, as you, all of you. But to me, leadership implies always in the terms of the revelation, not just merely social without spirituality, right? I am speaking about leadership in spiritual matters and in social leadership related with these spiritual matters, which is this kind of leadership is necessary in every aspect of the humanity, economic, political, social, everything. We need spiritual leadership, not spiritual leadership in itself, but spiritualized leaders. So leadership, to me, in spiritual terms, implies love, fatherly love. Fatherly love comes from our Father. It's a gift that the Father gives to us. It's a spiritual transformation. As Susan said, it's a matter of spirit of truth present in our souls, in our mind. And also implies service. I would recommend you to read when Jesus mentioned the authority of leadership. He was talking to Andrew. Andrew was the leader of the apostolic group. The qualities of Andrew. Why the master give Andrew and not other of the apostles the authority of leadership. This authority of leadership is essential to be able to guide others in this path of true progress. And this authority of leadership is given by the Father. So it is something that we must deserve to receive. What we need to do is the key to this leadership, to receive from the Father or Jesus, Michael, the authority of leadership. It is something that we must have certain qualities, but the first quality is the sincere desire to do the will of the Father. Without this sincere desire, with this spiritual transformation, we cannot receive this authority of leadership. And another question very important to me about leadership, it's true that the Father gives to the true leader the authority of leadership in the matters of the kingdom of heaven. It is not merely social, it is to guide others into the kingdom, to have the capacity to transmit the truth with the living faith, experiential faith, with the certainty of the experience, with these divine realities that are within ourselves. This experience, this communion, pray, worship, dedication to serve, this inner force is very important to this kind of leadership. But there is another question. Who establish who is a leader in human matters? It is not the leader in itself. It is others who see in that person qualities, values, inner strength, etc. And the people follows that person. It is people who says you are a leader. It is not an institution, it is not a degree, it is not a personal, here I am your leader, please follow me. That does not work. Do not work in that way. We choose to whom follow. And it depends also in our expectation, our desires, our aspiration, our, I lost the word, sorry, my English is very poor, but I think I have transmit more or less. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm very grateful, and I apologize for my poor Zoom skill today. I didn't know who was here until a few minutes ago, and now I see the name of Joe DiMaggio, and I feel so bad because I didn't call upon him for anything. And here we are, it's already past the hour, so our time is up for today. And I hope you will all come back next week. Yes, Jeannie?
Sorry, it was Donna has raised her hand, and maybe she has something to say.
Oh, Susan.
I'm sorry, that was
Oh,
an
Donna,
old,
yes.
that was old. I will let that point go. I was going to contribute the question, but it's okay. We can wrap up. I will take that down.
Well, I would love to receive questions from anybody and everybody. My experience is that a good question is usually worth more than most of the answers that people give to them. So, including me. So anyway, thank you so much for your participation and interest, and thanks to the author of the publication mandate and to Jeannie for doing this series, and for all of you for participating in sincerity. So I'll see you next week. And I love you, and I think we just have to say bye-bye now, unless maybe Jeannie wants to say something more.
Just thank you, everyone, and thank you, Sam. This is a teamwork, not just myself. I thank everyone for coming. I'm so happy to know Donna and to see you, everyone. I love you very much. I hope we can see you next week, next Saturday.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you, Jeff.
Have a nice week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Nice. God bless.
So nice to
Yes.
see you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Congratulations, Rick.
Rick, thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
See you. Thank you, Jeff.
Sam.
Thank you all.
Thank
Ellen.
you, Jeff.
Ellen.
Sorry,
You.
man.
Thank you.
Bye.